Hi, friends. My name is Kelly Harrell, for those of you who don't know me. Next year at Mount Hermon's 2021 conference, I'm going to be talking about writing characters with mental disorders. But this year, I wanted to give you a couple of tips on writing great dialogue. I love to write great dialogue, but when I first started writing, I didn't even know what an action beat was. I was clueless. I was all over the board in my dialogue. So I wanted to go through a couple things with you today. Number one, what's the purpose of dialogue? Well, uh, narration, it kind of slows down your story, but when you use dialogue between two or more characters, it really speeds up the action. So that's one of the things that it does is it kind of helps to propel the story forward, and moves it along a little faster. The other thing you can do in successfully in dialogue is you can reveal background or a backstory in dialogue. You can also reveal things about your characters in dialogue, so that it doesn't feel like an informational dump, right? What I love about dialogue is I think it makes the reader feel like more of a part of the story because it's almost like they're eavesdropping, right? I mean, I have to admit, sometimes I'm like on the telephone and my kids will walk through the room and I'll be talking and all of a sudden they'll like smile or laugh because I said something. I know they're eavesdropping. And they feel a part of the conversation. That's what dialogue does for your reader. I think it really draws them into the story in a deeper way. And also, just like if you're having a conversation with someone, you feel really connected, right? So in writing dialogue, you have that opportunity to show connections forming between your characters, or if your characters don't get along, then you can show that disagreement or that bad relationship between them. So, how do you write dialogue? Okay, so here's the thing. I have heard from most all editors that you can say he said, she said when you're using dialogue tags, okay? Or you can say whispered, like he whispered in her ear. But those are the only dialogue tags you're supposed to use besides action beats. So, what are action beats? Well, action beats are basically when your characters do something um, before the dialogue or in between the dialogue, and that actually tells the reader exactly who is talking. So that's kind of how you can maneuver around having to always say, Joe said, Mary said. Um, and it also, what's nice about that is it helps to build the scene of your book. It helps the reader to know exactly what's going on in the story, and it builds that visual picture in their mind. I wanted to take a minute, just a real quick minute. I'm going to read you a little piece of dialogue from one of my books. This is from, oh, I don't know. This is like the seventh book that I published. It's called The Deceived. Just a real quick backstory. Danny is the main character. This book is a little different because it's from Danny's POV, and so it's first person. So first person POV, point of view. And Danny is the main character. At this point, Danny is abusing drugs and alcohol. Okay. He does not have good relations with his family. And this is at the end of Thanksgiving dinner. And the conversation Danny's going to have is with Dylan, who is Danny's oldest sister's boyfriend. Okay, so this is the first time that the reader actually meets Dylan. So one of the things I wanted to do was to get the reader to introduce the reader to Dylan, because Dylan's going to be in the next book. So I wanted them to know a little bit about him. I also wanted the reader to kind of understand, to get in Danny's head a little bit about his feelings about his family. Okay. So here we go. It's the end. I'm going to start with a little narration and then it's going to go straight into the dialogue. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner goes well. The conversations focus on college for Anna and Mary and where Lydia is applying. I think I'm in the clear until the girls help Mom carry the dishes to the kitchen and Dad excuses himself to nap on the couch in front of the game. Cocaine is a pretty rough drug. Dylan folds his hands on the table and leans forward. The first high is always the best, but no matter how much you do after that, you can't achieve the same feeling. You speak from experience? I cross my arms over my chest. No, he chuckles. From what I've read, heard from users, there are a ton of side effects: insomnia, bloody noses, anxiety, paranoia, anger. Good to know, I stand. I'm sure it's hard, being the youngest and a boy. You're a psychologist too? I shake my head. You have no idea. And whatever you think you know, forget it. I start to walk from the room. It'll only get worse. His comments cause me to pause. Whatever you think you have under control, you're wrong. It's controlling you, and it'll continue to control you. I slowly turn. You're new around here. Let me fill you in on how it works in this family. Mary and Anna are smart and the super spiritual ones who do no wrong. Lydia has a big heart, which sometimes gets her in trouble because she lives by her emotions. And I'm the screwed up one whose only redeeming feature is being a good shortstop. I'd appreciate you having the facts before throwing around judgments, because my father will believe anything you or Mary say about me. Your assumptions could destroy my life. I pause. Unless that's the kind of hypocritical jerk you are, in which case, welcome to the family. Okay, so did you see in that course of dialogue, never once did I say Danny said or Dylan said. I just used their action beats to let you know who is talking. You speak from experience. I crossed my arms over my chest. So that shows you how Danny's feeling in that moment. It shows you he's being insecure. That's the cool thing about action beats too, right? A lot of times there's all this body language that goes on that actually shows the reader how the character's feeling. No, he chuckles. So that is Dylan. And why is he chuckling? Well, maybe to make the mood a little lighter, maybe because, he's feeling uncomfortable. Danny stands because he's had enough, and then he shakes his head and he starts to walk away. So the other cool thing too that you can do with action beats is a lot of my characters, a lot of the conversations happen over dinner, right? Which, okay, it can be a little too much. Sometimes you don't want every single dialogue to be at a meal. But if you think about it, a lot of times, when do you have conversations with the people you love, right? A lot of times it might be at a meal. And so they can be passing food or they can be cutting their steak, things like that. So one of the important things to do, though, after you write a scene of dialogue, it's super important that you read it out loud for authenticity. Also think about whether or not you should use contractions. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think so. A lot of times when I'm typing, I'll say you are rather than your, or I'll say do not instead of don't. But in dialogue, it's more natural for people to use contractions, depending on who's speaking. Of course, you have to think about that. Also think about the character and what is their dialect going to be. You want to make sure too that your characters sound different, that they have different speech patterns. That is super important because that brings more authenticity to your story. So I really hope that these tips on dialogue were helpful. If you have any questions whatsoever, or you know what, I would even be happy to read one page of your dialogue if you want a little feedback on it. You can reach out to me. My website is kellyharrell.com. That's KELLYHARREL. So you can go ahead and message me there and I can send you my email address. But I would love to connect with you. I love helping writers along in their journey. And I hope you had a fabulous Mount Hermon's 2020 conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2021.